Thank you once again to the organizers and the listeners. My warm greetings to you. Um, First thing first, why did I write this book? Because, as you are saying, today's world is a polarized world. Why is it a polarized world? So, if you follow the social media discourses between the left and the right, any some issue comes, this is the typical conversation. Left says, okay, you see, this is a problem, and then right says, yeah, but you are doing what about Tari? Why you have not? You are saying this, but you have not done in the other places. And then left says, that's what about Tari? And the right says, you are sort of biased. Then the left says, yeah, we have a framework. You don't have any framework, and so you are essentially uh, being you are not sort of correct. The right says you are bigoted, and the left says, you are sort of duffers. So, and then conversation sort of breaks down. So the essential point is the left they have a framework, and and right may not have any framework. And this is not sort of good thing. I mean, for the both the parties' point of view. So of course the framework is sort of very important. If we try to learn physics, we need to go to physics, right? A framework, a model, and that right may not have. And the left sort of says because it has this, is sort of correct. So what it will come out? So I'm trying to say both the parties' point of view. The right insists on reality and data. The left insists on framework. I tried to match both of them together. So this is my humble sort of effort, very humble effort as a very humble person to create a dialogue. Of course, all the authors they are biased towards their own creation, right? All the parents they are biased towards their own children. So, of course, I would have my biases. I will openly acknowledge it, but I will also say something that everybody has biases. Probably my biases are no more than the existing theory. That's all I'm trying to say. So I have a big presentation, like 65 slides or so. I have given Rishikesh the link. You can get it from him. In my homepage. I'll show some of them selective because the time is 30-35 minutes, and I did do that. My family has a strong connection with the left. My grandfather, who was a sort of full timer and all. So the left theories, I sort of knew them from the childhood. I was sort of an early convert, you might say. But sort of I found that not all of them are exactly suitable all the time. And this is how I sort of trying to guide my intellectual evolution. So let me just tell you whether you can see the. I can't see the show the slides, but I can show the screen. Yeah. Uh, Now, do you see the screen, all of
Yes,
you?
sir, it's visible. You can make
Ah,
it full screen, sir.
shall I make it full screen?
Yes, sir.
Ah, yeah, yeah. So this is the title of the book and all. I actually studied for more than a decade on these different issues. I've given most of the references and all in the book, so I'll not talk much. So the word myth, it is also an academic term. It has been used by a researcher. His name is Sohail Inayatullah. Sohail Inayatullah is a very reputed researcher on futurology. So he says there are different different social concepts are sort of different deep. Some are very deep and some are not so deep. So myth is the deepest social concept that creates out all the other expressions of social framework or social narrative. So I've given the reference of Inayatullah's work, very learned person. Um, but skip it. Not everything can be done. But I'll roughly say the idea of the majoritarian myth. So the idea is basically a society is divided between the majority and the minority, and the majorities are sort of are aggressors, and minorities are victims. And because it is so, there is a social duty from the different social stakeholders like media, academia, judges. And the idea is because minorities are being always sort of subject to sort of aggression, we need to address that. by not highlighting highlighting more on the attacks on them and highlighting less on sort of their aggression. So this is the sort of outline. So the people who do it, they do not have any bad intention. They have sort of the best of the intentions. So the idea is you sort of um, this is where you should bring peace and harmony in the society, because you sort of balance out the aggression against the minority. So that's sort of the idea. It is, I mean, I have done my book in the Indian context because I am an Indian writer. I mean, Americans may not listen to me too carefully, but it is also true. Similar things are true in the American concepts. I have more or less dealt my book with Hindus as majority. I mean, you will see, and Muslims as minority, but it is equally applicable at whites as majority and blacks as minority and all such things. Yeah. So I just, these are some statistics that what I'm saying is sort of the true. You know, these are the two names, Hafiz Junaid and Umesh Kole. Hafiz Junaid was killed in the train, and very unfortunately. And okay, so there's a sort of headline in BBC. There's a plural, which is may not be the case, but the idea is basically because he was sort of Ed Beef, he was sort of killed. But the justice who has the domain knowledge what exactly happened, he says that it is about cis sharing. But anyway, it could be an violence, but we know this name quite well. The second name we don't know so much well, because the number of news items are less. Again, he was also killed for some religious reasons. He is nothing of he supported some controversial statements and all, but he was also, nothing was robbed from him. Similarly, I give some statistics. Like Aklas of Dadri, unfortunately, in 2015, I think is a 50 plus old person. Again, there's a 1,915 results. Almost same time, in Prasant Pujari in Karnataka was killed, but very less results. So I have used this stream called global news stream. Global news stream is sort of a platform where they have all the news items from prominent newspapers of the world. So this is like world media, right? Not Indian media, and also some academically important pieces. So you can see both the things are like much differently highlighted, and I told you the reason, because this is the idea of so essentially the idea that majority always oppresses. This is called majoritarianism or majoritarian idea, and to negate this is called counter majoritarianism. But this is also the popularly called majoritarian itself. Negating majoritarian is also often popularly called majoritarian. Now, again, same story here. So this is like individual incidents, right? Many things are individual incidents are important, but here these are like big incidents, like Kashmiri Pandits being driven out. It's like these are official statistics: 1,20,000, biggest, internal displacement in independent India. We got only 1,800 reports. Post Godhra riots, again, see in the Kashmiri case, it is sort of, I mean, the only Kashmiri Pandits sort of became victims of violence. No other side may not have not anyone. In the Godhra case, of course, Muslims, it is primarily against Muslims. They unfortunately suffered a lot. But Hindus also suffered, not exactly zero. It is also somewhat there. These are official statistics. And understandably, the exact statistics is anyone's guess for all the cases. But as a author, I have to only go by the official statistics. But the point I'm trying to say that there's a lot of I mean asymmetry. I mean, after the post Gujarat riots, no Muslims I know of exactly left the Gujarat. I mean, there are one of a few that left. One of them actually went to Kolkata, but he came back again. And I saw his interview a few days ago by Bengali journalist, and he was saying he's sort of doing all right now and all. So the point I'm trying to say that this violence, Gujarat violence is an Kashmir violence, sort of not very differential to consider, but of course in this case many people left. Here nobody left, but still number of reports are sort of more. And the idea is very same because it is a majoritarianism idea. Now it is possible that actually Indian constitution is biased against the minority. This is not impossible. So I did a lot of survey on that. I actually had research intern and did a lot of things. Achha, so I just first I go back to this more scenarios. So what I've done actually a more rigorous analysis by 3 years data, 2020, 21, 22. And there are so many mentions of these two words, majoritarian and majoritarianism. Many times these are written as an abstract theories. As I told you, this database also considers many academic ideas and all things, not exactly always related to the real news. But many of the cases, and whenever I could relate, suppose it says this is a majoritarianism, and in this case, the Hindu majority, the majority Hindus, then I understand that this is actually being talked about this majority as Hindus. And I actually looked into this who are sort of being blamed. And I found that, again, I mind you, this is global media. So 80% of the time, the majority is the Hindus of India. Buddhists and Sinhalese are 7.8, whites of USA is 2.2, and rest of are very less. There are some Hindi speakers. Americans have very less understanding of India to an extent, for most Americans. So Hindu and Hindi are sort of interchangeably used, and they also sometimes feel the same thing. So if you look at all these things, this in the Indian subcontinent, Hindus and Buddhists are sort of blamed for 90% of the things. I mean, that is, I think, quite shockingly disproportionate, because number of people in this continent is, let's say, 20%. Of course, number of Hindus and Buddhists are much even lesser. So from that point of view, it is sort of quite disproportionate. So what I have done, I have tried to. So the point I'm trying to say that it's not an academic problem, right? We academicians, we write academic problems. Nobody cares about. This is the allegation, but this is not the academic problem. This is a real problem. So I looked into the Indian Constitution. I mean, whether it has really given more sort of things to Indian Hindus. Actually, it is not so. So, for example, Article 25, it has guarantees freedom of religion. It has three components: profession, practice, and propagation. So I went into the Constitutional Assembly debates. Originally, it is about profession and practice, not propagation. uh, Actually, in Indian culture, the idea of sort of conversion is sort of not very known. The idea that people have to sort of elevate themselves by uh, their own rituals and other things, like Buddhism, it went from places to places. Now they have not formally made people Buddhists. They just taught the Buddha's Tathagata Buddha's teachings, and how you should sort of, it will help you to remove your violence from your mind and all sort of things. So propagation is not really a thing of our thing. But now suppose, and originally the Constitution Assemblies, the makers of our Constitution, they sort of did not like the idea, and then actually it was put in some insistence of um, some members of minority communities. They said this is sort of essential. It was put. But again, the point is here. This is again sort of quite British inspired, or let's say Protestant Christianity inspired in some sense. This tussle between two religions, it is not only Indian subcontinent phenomenon, it is phenomenon in many other places. One such place is East Europe. They are the Orthodox churches, they are not proselytizing, and but the these Protestant denominations are evangelizing and sort of aggressive. And in the Greek constitution, where basically the Orthodox people have sort of some say, they have actually banned in some sense propagation, but they actually allow you profess to have any religion, but they don't ban propagation. So the idea is essentially propagation makes people aggressive, and this sort of distorts social harmony. You can always have freedom of religion by having the profession and practice. Again, as I told you, our religious traditions are not do not do that. Now, suppose it is propagation is imposed, then they will have to change, right? That's how this real world works. Uh, and then Hindus and primarily Hindus, but to an extent Buddhist also, they would become aggressive. They will change themselves, and then we might say that, well, Hindus are changing, but Hindus are changing because it's as a response to an extent. That's the point. Anyway, this is also asymmetric from that point of view. Article 28 doesn't allow the teaching of Hindu religious texts like Ramayana, Mahabharata, etc., Gita in the public education system. Uh, Now, of course, the in the article, the same article allows the minorities to teach their texts, which I sort of endorse. But I think the other thing also should be there. Every all the communities should have their right to teach sort of what they believe their culture. And Article 30 actually only awards the minorities, religious or linguistic. Usually it is religious. Some cases like in Karnataka, it is extended to the like Tulu speakers, to the linguistic minorities also. So they are run their education institutions, but not to the majority. So, but if I just studied the other constitutions of the West, like UK, France, Belgium, US, nowhere else that is the scenario that majorities are sort of not allowed. So that's sort of an idea. So judiciary also some issues are there, but I'll skip it. So this entire Sabrimala affair, because it's Kerala, I mean, a lot of people are from Kerala. Let me just say a little bit. The idea of the Sabrimala affair is about a judicial idea. It is called essential religious practices. So any religion, is it something is essential religious? Now, for a religion that is book based, it is easy because it's written in the book. But Indian religions traditions are not book based; they are tradition based. So nothing is coming from the book. It is sort of, this is being done for so many generations and all. It has might have evolved and so, but this is sort of the tradition. Under that sort of a situation, you cannot really say anything is essential or not, right? Because nothing, nowhere it is written. And so Sabrimala practices, it is considered not essential because it is not written, and therefore the court sort of had some judgment. So later, I think the Tarun Gogoi bench, they sort of put some amendment and sort of stay on that, but it has not solved the matter conclusively. So there are some other evidences in politics and other things, but I mean, yeah, we can talk about this all this. There is this Covenant Violence Bill that has sort of assumes this idea. And then, of course, Ramchandra Guha, he has a very leading intellectual voice. He actually talked that Shivaji statue in New Delhi would be is an act of majoritarianism. These sort of ideas. So I sort of stop here. So I actually, if you actually ask me what's the ideal is not to involve politics. This is a scholarly idea and all. But unfortunately, in the real world, I have to involve politics. Otherwise, the ideas cannot be explained. Um, it is. I'm not saying that one political party is right, others are wrong. I think there are goods and bads in all the sides and all. So basically there is a paradox. The paradox is there is a majoritarian Hindu paradox, basically which says there's Hindus are blamed disproportionately for being majoritarian in the global media. Um, now, but constitution, judiciary, politics. I mean, this is the politics. I do not say complete, but a part of, actually, definitely a part of politics and judiciary are the idea of the majority is culture in some sense of the term. So that's the paradox. Second part is about the origin of the myth. So the idea of majority is important only perhaps in a democracy. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. So first person who talked about it is Plato. Now Plato talked about a very different kind of majority. That's a knowledge-based majority, not identity-based. So he is saying, suppose you are in a ship, let's say you are in an aeroplane for the current context, and there's a turbulence in the aeroplane. Whom would you trust? The majority of the passengers or the few people who know aviation? Essentially, everybody will say, well, knowing aviation is important, well, even though they are minority. So the majority is not sort of very important. The knowledge should sort of decide it. And if you let the majority talk about it, it will be tyranny. So that is what the Plato's idea is. And the same idea sort of continued even, 2000 years later. This French diplomat, Alexis de Tocqueville, he toured America and he wrote a book, Democracy in America. There's this term he used, tyranny of the majority. So he essentially is saying that, that time European, both the house, there are two houses, right? One is lower house and the upper house. The lower house used to be sort of the, what I say, the lower house used to be the common people, plebeians, and the upper house is from the elite, those who have the, experience of governance. So from both the parties, from this point of view, the upper house used to have sort of more experiential knowledge. The lower house is like people. And it is called lower house because they did not want the tyranny of the majority in some sense of the term. Now, Tocqueville, when he came to America, he found in America that is not the case. Both the houses are decided by people only. And he said this is so atrocious that there is no value for experience and all. And he sort of said that should have more men of experience, as is the case in Europe that time. Now this is again dwelt upon by John Stuart Mill. He has a very famous book on liberty. Now Mill says yes, this is a problem, But Mill says the problem should be empowering the minority. And who is the minority? So he is saying the most important minority is the minority of one, the individual. So you should actually empower individual rights, like freedom of speech and all. So what Mill is saying, Mill is sort of giving it a sort of a theoretical tone, and that is what being followed. But Mill sort of discounted something. He sort of discounted the idea that in a way that um, he sort of focused on individualism more. In the current context, the people who talk about counter majoritarianism, they don't give that much focus on individualism. So there's this bridge. Then the issue comes to Antonio Gramsci. Antonio Gramsci was a communist leader, socialist communist leader in Italy, and he was sort of jailed by Mussolini, and he wrote a lot of important things. And these are collectively called the prison notebooks. There he has mentioned the idea. So essentially, Marxism talks about two classes. We all know here from Bengal and Kerala, we all definitely know. So the idea is basically this bourgeoisie and proletariat, but these are economic based. If you want to go to the culture domain, then you will have someone with hegemony. Bourgeoisie is someone with hegemony, and proletariat is without hegemony. Now you can actually make this majorities as the hegemony and minority without hegemony and somehow define it. So that's how it is sort of being used now. This concept was also extensively studied by Frankfurt School of Germany, and when Hitler sort of did his persecution, many of these thinkers, they are socialists, some of them are Jews. They are sort of they had to leave Germany, and they ended up in America, and they discourse the what we generally call the liberal discourse. So this liberalism is called left liberalism, and this is what generally liberalism is all about in the current world. So you got the idea why how is it coming? I stop it. I mean, there's a lot of history on India and other things, but you should read the book. Now, question is, this thing cannot be avoided if we really believe in the all cultures are symmetric. And so there are two assumptions. One is all cultures are symmetric, and second one is these societies, different organs, they are at war or they are sort of conflict. Of course, in society we see conflict, but we also see cooperation. It only assumes conflict, so that's one thing. But I'm not going to even talk that assumption. I'm talking about even the first assumption. Are all cultures are symmetric? So if you think two countries, two communities disputes, usually you go back to this guy these people have done that, these people even before done that, these people even before done that. So this is like a recurring circle, never ending. But some cases we know the answer. When the Europeans came to America, the New World people, the indigenous Americans, were very, very nice to them. They greeted them with much courtesy. But the Europeans, they were completely ruthless. So this is something featured in many books. David Stannard's book, American Holocaust. There are other books also. So essentially, there is a complete asymmetry of culture. So I tried to explain this concept by using my own theory. This is not exactly my own theory. It is a sociological theory. It is called linear theory of social evolution. Sometimes call it linear theory of social change. So it is been referred by Yuval Noah Harari in his book. So idea is some cultures think that this culture will only expand, go on up. There is no decline is possible. The other cultures may not have any such opinion or may have a cyclical opinion. So as an example, Yuval Noah talked about Christianity. Christianity thinks, I mean, political Christianity, you might say, because there is a lot of people practicing Christians who really believe in inner values and all without any political understanding. That does not apply to them. So the idea is basically they see that the Christianity is sort of bringing peace and then it should sort of grow. Then and because they believe in it, anything for that cause looks good to them. So that is sort of the idea of political Christianity and a linear theory of social evolution. So I'll give you one concrete example. So one of the worst massacres India saw in the 20th century is Jallianwala Bagh massacre in Punjab. where Michael Dyer, he actually showered bullets to unarmed people and killed many hundreds of people. Now, this is sort of quite barbaric. Even Rabindranath Tagore, who was otherwise good terms with the British, he sort of repudiated his knighthood in protest that. Now, if you look at the reaction of the British people in India, it was, some people like British ladies, they were sort of raising fund for Dyer, not for the victim. And why is it true? Because they have this idea of linear theory in mind, where they are thinking that this doctrine has to grow and all, and we have to bring peace and harmony. So they are otherwise nice people, they are not bad persons, but because they believe in this idea, this linear idea that sort of justifies any kind of imperialism, they were supporting Michael Dyer. So this is the larger idea. So this is what I formally defined. LTS is a linear plan, and this is available without any. So if you have any data, the data does not change the plan. So I give an example of Gandhiji. Gandhiji was considered the most having the most amount of Christian values in the contemporary Europe and Christian countries, but he was not a Christian. So that may mean that Christian values can be actually attained by others also. It is not necessarily to have the denomination spread, but the values only spread without the denomination, or the church, for example, right? By denomination I mean church. So it is possible that you have Christ, like Vivekananda. He was a said about the Christian values, the values of Christ, but he was not a Christian. So now question is that actually sort of puts a question in the light that the empirics, the data, you see that non-Christians are also having the values. So it is not really necessary to have this linear plan, but of course, because it's a theory, it cannot be changed by data. Similarly, the second idea is otherization. So if you are not a Christian, it is not an academic word. So nowadays, I concluded in my book, political Christianity is dead in Europe. There is no political Christianity. So in the present world, may not be applicable for Christianity. So there is no otherization. But when political Christianity was at its peak, it was there. I give you a very simple example. The Europeans, they are very particular about property rights and all. In the 17th century, they started the company law in England, and they actually have the share of people and the land and all these sort of things. However, when they went to the Americas and the other countries or Africa, they took it. Now you might say it's colonization. Yes, it is colonization. But colonization was not completely an economic affair. It has also its moral apologia. One person, J. Sai Deepak, he has written some of it in his book, India That is Bharat. Uh, and my theory sort of enjoys congruence social identity theory, which is a notable theory in OB, organizational behavior. So this is sort of my categorization, and I have given the sources for all of them from their own thinkers. These are the linear theories: political Christianity, political Islam. So again, tell you, I repeat that I have nothing against religion. In fact, I believe that some part of religion is good for you when you try to do introspection, when you try to uplift yourself. But there is a political version which is sort of problematic. Nazism, racism, cultural Marxism, liberalism. Now, not necessarily LTCs, I will explain all of them. Nationalism, Hinduism, Hindutva. Now, Yuval Noah Harari, this is not my thing, is not actually, it is sort of consistent with the other thinkers. Yuval Noah Harari, his famous book Sapiens, he called Nazism, communism, and liberalism as religions, like I have done here. And Tom Holland and other Christian thinkers, they also deny that Hinduism is sort of religion like Christianity. They say Christianity is the original religion because Hinduism does not have anything the other religions. So this is the classification. I've given the sources in my book. So because in the right hand side, it might sort of provoke little debate and explain the right hand side why nationalism, Hinduism, and Hindutva, not LTSs. I'll do that part. On the left hand side, I skip it. You can read the book, say all these things are there. Quotes from the original sources. Um, Now, nationalism means basically uh, no theory. So the people can change. So essentially, if you think America, it was originally a nation of white Christians, but now it is expanded to people of any color, of any religion or no religion. So it is expanding, it is ever changing. It's not a frozen thing. It changes. I have a lot of I do not, I'm not saying all everything America has done is correct and not, no, not at all. But they don't have a frozen theory. That is the idea of it. So often people bring Hitler as sort of a nationalist, but Hitler could not be imagined as a leader of China, India, Russia, these kind of diverse nations. He was a sort of, his nationalism is a racism of some kind, and it has also, I've quoted from Mein Kampf. His main thing is, in some sense of the term, he is saying that the social thought um, basically is basically it is a socialism of some kind, and it is also racism, and this is what it is being shown. So essentially, there is a theory here. This is a linear theory here in Adolf Hitler. It is not a typical nationalism. If you, for example, if you look at Great Britain, there it's a Christian country, but their prime minister Rishi Sunak was a practicing Hindu. So it is a very evolving, changing thing. Uh, this is also of sort of concurrence with Yoram Hazony, a very famous conservative thinker. This is a book, Virtue of Nationalism. But I go on. Now, what about Hinduism? So Hinduism has no sort of a theory. So there is no collective destiny of the Hindus. Whether they will go up, firstly, Hinduism is not also defined anywhere. It is sort of thought about local culture and all. And here's a famous statement by Gandhiji. He said, I am a Hindu, a Muslim, a Christian, a Persian, Jew. And Jinnah said, only Hindu could say that. So this essentially means Hinduism is sort of a very different sort of a religion. Same thing has been told by Nehruji. He said Hinduism as a faith is vague, amorphous, many-sided, all things to all men. It is hardly possible to define it. So essentially, he is saying that it's a very sort of different, doesn't have a theory. It is sort of a culture. If you are an academician, here's also one, S.N. Bal Gangadhara. He came here also, like 7 years ago. He has a book, Hidden in His Blindness. He was also president of American Association of Religion, Academy of Religion. And this book actually shares Hinduism is a construct and there is no theory and all. What about Hindutva? Of course, this is the hot button. So now you have to sort of understand it's more nuanced way. Hindutva just means the Hinduism and Hindutva, both the words were coined almost the same time. Hinduism was coined by the Westerners. They are trying to get a religion out of it. Hindutva was coined by the Indians when they are trying to define the culture of the place, culture of the land. So first book that came out on that, this is by Chandranath Basu in Bengali. This is about the culture, and the same thing was written by Rabindranath Tagore in his article called Hindutva. And he essentially, you can read it up, but essentially he's saying the idea of Hindutva is basically not to have an anthropocentric world. In many dogmas, men are the most central focus. But for this culture of this place which is called Hindustan or India or Bharat, whatever you call it, the civilization, the idea is more selflessness and to teach people selflessness so that so you are not human beings are not at the center of the world. So definitely there is no linear theory and all. Second part is Savarkar. Savarkar has a book Hindutva, and then again, so he is again his talk about things, but he actually says these are quotes from his book, and he is saying that Muslims are as patriotic and noble mind uh, as the Hindus, that sort of a thing. His party's manifesto is equal rights and all. So I'll move on. But I'm not saying that everything these people are saying correct or not. I'm not saying even saying that those which are not linear theory are all correct. Like I said, that some nationalisms are not also correct and all. But I'm saying there's no theory, linear theory of growth and imperialism. That's all I'm trying to say. Now, what about the present version of Hindutva? Of course, there can be a version of Hindutva that could have a linear theory on all. But I try to live in the real world and face the versions that is sort of I see. So here, this is the data. If you look at this academia and media, so essentially I looked at the number of riots before Narendra Modi 6 years, after Narendra Modi 6 years. I mean, data was available in lab when I wrote it, and there is actually a decline in the number of cases of riots. There is an increase in pro-minority scholarship. Welfare schemes also, there is no allegation of any discrimination. So if you just put in a context of a Nazism, for example, after Hitler came to power, immediately within 4 months, many Jewish people are out of Germany. So there's a Nobel laureate who, Jewish scientist who invented ammonia, preparation of ammonia. He was also out. He died on the way. So that sort of a, I mean, this is actually, even this is equal and all, this is sort of, but this is sort of the, after this government, there is no sort of anti-minority systematic data I could see here. That is all I'm trying to say. So I'll sort of stop this exercise with support with the most important person, which is called Karl Popper. Karl Popper has something called a paradox of tolerance, and he talks about the unlimited tolerance, his disappearance and tolerance and all. But this actually crucially says he also believed in differential of culture. Some cultures are more intolerant, some cultures are less intolerant. And he sort of talks about not any majority, but only degree of intolerance. So these are the books, these are written in favor of counter majoritarianism. They stop at this juncture. They give their opinion, they critique the other's idea, and that's it. But my book does not stop there. I actually do a scientific testing of my hypothesis versus their hypothesis, because I wanted to understand that only framework cannot guide you. The framework has to sort of be tied to reality. So as an example, there's a Czech doctor who found the germs in the Vienna General Hospital. That time the understanding was that germs were sort of, so many people used to die during childbirth at hospital. And everybody used to blame everyone but the doctors. But this young doctor has found, and nobody used to blame doctors, because doctors are having good mind to treat people. Why should you blame them? But these guys saw the statistics, and he found that when doctors are there, the patients are dying more. When doctors are not there, they are dying less. And then, so the idea is uh, essentially the doctor, they do some other surgeries and they carry the germs and then affect the mothers, and they often die after the birth. So this is this is shows science does not depend upon intention. It depends upon sort of how you sort of data says. So I'll show the data. I'll not take long. I think may have got like I'll take 10 more minutes and then I'll stop. So I have a majoritarian hypothesis which says the majority are guilty. The LTSC hypothesis says culture with linear theories are sort of maybe guilty of intolerance. So these are two different ideas. So what I have done, I look into the genocides. There are many, many genocides, but I looked into there are actually 1500 genocides recognized. I looked into the top 10 genocides. And I found that none of these cases, the majority is involved. Even the Nazi genocide, the majority was not involved. Majority of Germans did not even know. It is only a very small percentage of the Germans who did it or who had knowledge about it, who could decide it. Uh, and but if you look at the LTS, yes, every case there is a linear theory that says everything has to be eliminated. The most amount of people that participated in a genocide is Rwandan genocide, so where 11% people participated. This is very high, but that is the highest. Other cases it is less. But even in Rwandan genocide, they have a linear theory that Hutus are sort of chosen people, and the Tutsis has to be eliminated, right? So that sort of a theory is there. So I'm saying the idea that majority, most of the people, a majority are sort of violent and an aggression in their heart may not be the right idea. It is probably the doctrine or dogma that is more important. Now we go to the small incidents of intolerance. Now what happens is a problem. Suppose you believe in media reports, then often the aggressor and victim identifying them is not easy. So there is a psychology literature that says there are three drug triads, which are called Machiavellism, narcissism, and psychopathy. So they basically tell to you have to do something called virtuous victimhood. So you pretend to be sort of being attacked, and then you do much more aggression. So one option is I can see in the Nazi Germany, Nazi Germany, when they attacked these Polish people, Poland, on the, I think, 1st September 1939. So they actually pretended, they did some false flag operation. They pretended the Polish people attacked Germans. And this was the truth that time, because BBC also circulated that. So this is the idea. You attack others and show your victim, then you do much bigger attack. So media report may not be a good thing. Similarly, the amount of recorded violence may not also help. So what I use, this is a framework. This is by Hayek, Friedrich Hayek. I've used also other places, Ronald Coase framework. I could not show you because of paucity of time. So Hayek says there is something called tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is everybody knows, but nobody talks about. So tacit knowledge says the victim and aggressor both know what is sort of a who is the aggressor, who is victim. Other persons like media may not know, but victim knows they are getting defeated, they are being aggressed, the aggression is happening upon them. So they sort of decide that they have no choice but to move out. So they will migrate out, and population proportion will sort of decrease. So I illustrate this with the case of Nazi Germany again, because it's the easy, most known case. The Jews are sort of used to allege the Nazis were doing discrimination. But if you look at the Nazi propaganda, it is other way around. They will show the Jews have all the controls and they are trying to squeeze out the Nazis. Now, who is right? How would you know? You look at the population proportion, right? No Nazi got out of Germany, but Jews, of course, did. Emigrated out of Germany. So from that point of view, you sort of know who is the aggressor, who is the victim. Now I have done this framework, and these are the tests I have done. There are 4 cases. One is majority, minority, both are having LTSs. So they are so both the cases they both are having LTSs. So both majoritarian hypothesis will say diminish minority population. The LTC hypothesis will say depends on the strength of your LTC and all. The context is Sri Lanka and Myanmar, where both the parties have to an extent this, and we see sort of no more, not much change. So this is inconclusive. Sometimes both majority and minority have no LTSC, such as let's say Brazil. There is no, America. There are blacks and whites. Brazil, there are black people and white people, but there is no. They are not called blacks and whites. They are all Brazilians, and there is of course no sense of any persecution and all. So nothing is possible. Now, is it possible that majority is having LTSC, the minority is without LTSC? So I've given all these examples with data and references that I'm not quoting, of course, but because of paucity of time. Again, the majoritarian and LTSC, both hypotheses conclude the same thing, that minority population will decrease. And this has happened in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and you can see the documentation. But I think the cause is more related to some linear theories, aggressive Islamism in this particular case. In the other case, when the majority do not have an LTSC, but minority has LTSC, this is interesting, because majoritarian hypothesis will predict a diminished minority population, but LTSC will project other way around, a diminished majority population. And the data is actually a diminished majority population. In India, you can see that basically over time, the Hindu population, the majority population, is actually declining over time. Is India is sort of very exceptional case? Actually, no. If you see Lebanon, where there are classical Orthodox Christians and aggressive Arab nationalism, the Arabs have a linear theory, and Lebanon is actually Christian population decreased, even though they were the majority. Same thing happened with Tibet also, and there are other countries also. So I just keep all these things. Now, this is also told by a person, Nassim Nicholas Salem. He has a book, The Skin in the Game, where he mentioned it. Basically the stubborn minority, we might say intolerant minority is more important. And this is one Popular Front of India document that actually says the same thing. They say that we don't need majority, we need to be more intolerant. So this is the tacit knowledge argument. Those who are doing it, they would know. This is sort of fitting up. Now there are 2 acute strawman cases that are mentioned. One is structural violence. So basically, if you look at the national sample survey, Muslims are having sort of less formal jobs and all those sort of things. It is often attributed to violence against the minority. Uh, so again, I just don't take me too simply. I'm not saying there is no violence against minority and all sort of a large things. I'm saying that as a net, is there a scope for majoritarianism as a good theory or sort of a theory that matching the data? There is definitely some aggression against a minority and all these sort of things. But I mean, my humble point is this is also possibly true about the majority also, and they are sort of maybe cancelling out in some sense. And so again, here you can see the many minorities like Sikhs and Christians, they are actually doing better than Hindus even. So basically, the majoritarianism does not stand too much of a chance. More or less, for getting jobs, you need education, skill development, discipline, all these sort of things. Now, TFR of the Hindus are actually, or in fact, all these communities, Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, are less than Muslims. So arguably, Muslims, even with what a similar income, would be able to spend less for their children in skill and other things, and that will have some implications in formal job. So I'm saying that in this is a principle in science, Occam's razor. You have to see the simplest principle. Simplest principle is not giving any sort of scope for majoritarianism. Similarly, there is another strawman argument about violence. Muslims accounted for 19% of present population in India, although the population is only 14%. Is it because of discrimination? So to test it, I went to UK, where Hindus and Muslims both are minorities. The Muslim migrants are 4.2% in population, but much larger in prison population. Hindu migrants are 1.3%, but negligible. So now the point is, it is possible the culture in British sort of differential, and that sort of makes this scenario. That is the argument that looks much more logical rather than they are being discriminated. Because in UK, of course, it cannot be discrimination, the UK numbers, there has to be some reality. So I also discussed the other people who have written books on that, such as Ashutosh Bhasne. But I will stop there. So this is important. So the idea in India is experiential identities. Your identities are with your jati, and jati is in those pre-modern world. They used to mean like profession, guild, these kind of things. Um, we have also identities with our family. The family is much more important for Indians rather than any other things. So these are like real sort of identities. So I cannot, you can be my friend, but you cannot be my classmate because my went to a particular school, I identity with them. Some of my classmates, they completely disagree with my hypothesis, but they are still my classmates. They are still my friends. Uh, in fact, some of them actually, I mean, this is a good thing about experience identity. Even though they do not believe in my book and so, they like me as a friend and all. That's why they like the publication of the book. So this actually shows the power of the experiential identity. Sometimes the identities are very theoretical, like religion, nationality. It could be even race. Then in that case, what happens? Suppose I change my nation. So one fine day they are all Pakistanis, another fine day they became Bangladeshis. Does it mean there the people are really different? So this is the idea of the theoretical identity that changes very quickly. And these theoretical identities are often very intolerant because this is the idea. This idea is itself that you have to go, sort of go by a theory. This is what the idea is. Now, is it possible that so one idea is of course why a Hindu majoritarian paradox, because this in my definition this liberalism, it has also sort of an linear theory. It may not be as violent as many other linear theories, but still this also liberalism also talks about sort of forcefully fitting equality in spite of the empirical things. For example, men and women, I mean, almost all empirics will show they cannot run sort of as fast as each other. It is sort of, there's a difference. The difference might be less and all, but still there's a difference that is being there steady. But they will sort of deny this sort of things. So that's sort of the way, because it's a theoretical idea, it has to be sort of very aggressive. And which is why it will be sort of very aggressive against the cultures which are non-NTS. And this is why it will be sort of media will be against India. That is the conclusion. Now, suppose whatever I am saying is wrong. This is called a confirmatory test. Then what would you expect? You would expect more social harmony after the growth of liberalism and the social theories accompanying that. Is that the fact? So there are two studies I have looked into, one short run, one long run. This is the long run version. This is done by a few Ivy League professors, economics professors, very famous series, NBR working paper series. There they have found last 40 years, the amount of sort of intolerance for other opinions has rising in US. And this is the time when liberalism sort of entered the American campuses. We might say, well, so many things are going on in the long run. How would you know? Surely. So I look into the short run. In the short run, last 4 or 5 years, I mean, before Trump and all, but this is like 2020, 21, 22, 23. So this, so we looked into, there's a survey by Wall Street Journal. They again did the same thing, rise in intolerance, so lack of tolerance for others. And it was found that America, there's a big decline in 3 years from 80% to 58%. And in this 3 years short run, nothing else possibly has happened other than the liberal power being in place. So the social theories liberalism says, are they really bringing any harmony? There is a complete lack of evidence for that. So what is my prescription? So I'll take 2 more minutes. So basically, there are two kinds of social systems. Ones are theory driven, like liberalism, like communism, and some are empiric driven. So it sort of comes over time. Now, theory driven are based on a theory or book. Empiric driven are collective understanding. No book. It is more decentralized, and all sorts. These are sort of criteria. So the thing is, what is important is theory driven system, even though it might have some social intolerance, it is politically very powerful. Empiric driven systems are politically very less powerful because it's based on sort of there's a multiple voices, nobody knows what it means and all. So it is politically weak. So in India, we have a remarkable social harmony. I'll give you an example. So the most amount of diversity of languages was there in India, and it is still there, but it is declining steadily because we are focusing on a Western-driven formalism and theory. The tribes mentioned in the like 2000 years ago in the Ramayana, Gond, they are still there. The amount of ecological diversity, all the animals written in the Vedic Vedas, which is like 4,000 to 4,000 years ago, they are still there. But in the last 50 years, because of our some theory-driven ideas, we lost tiger, for example. I mean, almost lost. Cheetah, of course, lost. We brought in Africa, but that's not Indian person. So these things are sort of showing that these empiric-driven systems are sort of have more strength and more sort of nuances than we sort of be able to imagine. This theory-driven system is liberalism, and our social system, Indic social system, is empiric-driven. So what is the prescription? Liberalism talks of DEI, and Indian social system talks about two things. It's called Satta and Ahimsa. Satta and Ahimsa, Satta means the reality has to be unearthed. Ahimsa means, so basically, no violence, no beginning of violence. So the original, you do not start any violence, you will only respond the most proportional manner. You will never be the aggressor. So that's sort of not a complete abnegation of ahimsa, but sort of more nuanced version. This is what comes out from Mahabharata, Gautam Buddha, and other people. Gandhiji also talked about it definitely, and which is how I sort of started to learn about them. But Gandhiji, to an extent, he mixed the Russian Christianity understanding given by Rousseau in that, rather than going to the traditions. In some sense, when you are decolonizing, everybody has some blind spots, however towering figure he may be. So that is pretty much my idea about this book. This is the last word. And I will sincerely thank you. I sincerely thank you for listening to me. I will appreciate any questions that you might have. Thank you very much. Shall I stop sharing?
Sure, sir. So thank you at first, Kausik, sir, for sharing with us the essence of your book, which to my reading or to my understanding is to probe the core premise and the danger of numbers without understanding the nuances. I mean, that's what my reading is. And before I invite the participants to raise questions, And I have a couple of doubts, or probably I wish I could listen to you a little more. Um, and more than the title, I was also interested by your subtitle: how unscientific social theories create disharmony. And I think which implies that harmony is possible, is a possible alternative. So, what does social harmony mean in the framework that you have developed? I mean, that's probably the last part of what you had explained. Does it
Mhm.
mean agreement, or does it mean tolerance, or something more deeper, like epistemic humility? I don't know. I mean, uh, where do you anchor it?
So this is actually requires a completely different word, but I'll talk about little bit as I understand it. So actually, if you from this particular framework, tolerance means tolerance for your identity, and this is best happens when everybody has an only experiential identity. Nobody has a sort of this identities like religion or nationality. Uh, so we have the idea of dharma. Dharma is not really a religion. Dharma is a sort of a, you see, I will tell you a very good example why it's not a religion. So if you look at my dharma, it is multifaceted, nuanced. I have a dharma as an employee. I have a dharma as a father. I have a dharma as an husband, and some of them are may contradict sometimes. I have to choose one. So if you look at the idea of sending my kid to school, it is my dharma as a father. And here, suppose I have a Christian colleague, a very good friend, and their ideas are also same. So irrespective of the religion, the ideas are exactly same. And this is sort of, and if you look at the religion, it talks about no such. It is more of a theoretical notion. It does not have the nuances of experiential identity. Now, if the some parts of the religions definitely have dharma, and some parts of dharma may have like similar things as religion, but there is a dichotomy. That's what I'm trying to say. Now, the way I'm thinking of this plurality is basically your identities, your experiential identity will be protected, your language will be protected, your culture will be protected. So cultures are not stagnant; they move on, but they will move on normally. Languages will move on normally. There will be not a pressure to move your language, right? So that is sort of the idea of Indian plurality.
All right, sir. So one more thing, which and I was thinking more of its contemporary relevance of this book.
Mhm.
When you see the policies based on majoritarian thinking, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Like, for instance, the anti-conversion law, or today the immigration bans, or the surveillance of dissent. These are all often justified as, in quotes, protecting culture. Now,
Mhm.
what are the dangers of this rhetoric, and how does probably your book or your thoughts help unpack unpack the hollowness of such majoritarian thinking?
So definitely, I mean, as I told you, both sides, the left and the right, they have their problems. Left do not, the left has a framework, which is a nice thing, but sometimes the framework is divorced from reality. Right does not have a framework. It actually rides on populism and emotions, which is the danger part of it. Now, the anti-conversion bill is, I think, sort of may not be the right thing to go on. So basically, I mean, people should have the choice and all these things. But the other thing is, it because why did it start? It started because we have given propagation of religion as a sort of a
Right.
free will, right? So I'm saying that you have to look at the source. So of course there is a lot of this is what I mentioned in one line also. So I only talked about the Hindutvas I have seen. It is not impossible that it will morph into a linear theory, which is again dangerous and which is not also right thing to go ahead. But to understand that, we have to start negating the linear theories from all over. And I'll give you a very good example. You'll understand where I'm coming from. The Indian Islam was a much more syncretic Islam in the 19th century. It was sort of people, I mean, I know because I've read this, a lot of anthropologies, books that was written in 19th century Bengal. So there's a book by Rafiquddin Ahmed, Oxford University Press. He mentioned a lot of them. There's also a very British civilian. He discussed all the issues he saw. I think races, caste, trades in Eastern Bengal. So this was a much more a syncretic version of Islam, and there is no tension between Hindus and Muslims or minimal. I mean, there's always some tension would be unavoidable, but the identity-based statements are much less. But what happened? There was a version of Islam that grew in the 20th century, like Farisi movement and other things. They made it much more theory-driven, and that actually created a lot of tension many places. And this is unfortunately the Muslim League that was founded upon was actually backed by these kind of people. And we know the end result. It ended up in Pakistan and all. And of course, it is a net loss for all of us: Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, all of us. There's no net gain, right, from this, partition. So then, this is so basically because we did not have this understanding. The linear theories are sort of dangerous. This is why we let it happen, but did not lead to any steady outcome. So if we in India we have chosen the Western framework to brew tolerance. The Western framework says secularism, and secularism says that religion has to be sort of relegated to personal sphere. It should not come out in the public sphere. Now this is sort of quite okay in a Christian level of idea from where the Europe is coming from. So there's a famous book on that. It's by Jacob de Roover, Europe, India, and the Limits of Tolerance. This is the Oxford University Press, 2015. Now, in Indian culture, it is all the rituals are related with the secular things are all related with our culture. So let's say we start this learning of our script, learning of writing. So by doing some Saraswati Puja in many places. Even Muslims, they used to go in the eastern Bengal before this freezing of cultures. They used to come to Saraswati Puja and do it. So a very famous Muslim writer, Sayyid Mustafa Ali, who was a very disciple of Rabindranath Tagore. He used to know, he knew how to sort of know how, this Saraswati Puja. He was so learned on these things. So I'm saying those things were sort of sealed once you pick a linear version. And now it will go on. So the idea of this secularism, it is not good enough or it is not relevant enough in Indian context. What we can do actually as a banning of the linear theories, we can reform any doctrine. I mean, I'm not saying abolish any doctrine. We can defend every doctrine by removing the linear theory part of it. And then we can have a much more syncretic tradition and a very stable outcome. Yeah, please.
Yes, just adding on, today, since we are in the age of digital media and a lot of algorithmic and bias and in echo chambers, and how is the myth of the majority being amplified or distorted? And of course, social media platforms serve as mirrors or magnifiers of these myths. So how do we address it? Is it by limiting the social media usage, or is there any policy framework that as a country or as individuals, how should we be addressing this echo chambers, which is also amplifying the majoritarian myth?
So a lot of this is happening because of overt centralization. I mean, this will social media and other things. So in some sense, our governance has become too centralized, and this is actually Europeans started it. They started with the nation-state model, which was not the case before. But after they started it, we Asians, we are replicating it. We know how to sort of scale up. China has done scale up very big way. We are also scaling up, and this is also not creating any sort of a good solution for that. Now, if you are talking about a very particular solution, I have to think about it, because what I have seen, I have done my research and all on numbers and all. Without the numbers and social media, so some social media is organic, but some are amplified, right? And there is sort of some reasonable bias and all things other things. But so policy making is a I should say I have give you the philosophy. Philosophy is negating any kind of a linear theory. That is the philosophy of policy making. But exact policy, if you want to ask me, I need more research and more sort of resources.
Sure,
So
So
thankfully, I'm
this
an academician only. Yeah.
right. So there's one question which has come in the chat window by Dr. Ramya Dinesh. What happens when flawed theories pass off as social truths? What if majority doesn't mean majoritarian?
So that is the idea of the book. So basically, I'll tell you more philosophically. So we have two brains. One is called left brain, one is called right brain. Left brain is about structures. Right brain is about ideas. So that is the general way they sort of classified it. Now, the we have a problem of intolerance that is related to some dominance and other things. So this is a real thing. But then we try to structure it based on numbers and all, and that sort of killed this problem. So this is the idea that is happening here. So basically, the all identities are not equal identities and all. But suppose we impose these theories too ruthlessly or too drastically or as a social narrative, then what happens? The other side also gets radicalized, and so there is no solution that we arrive at. That is sort of the idea I'm trying to.
We have Malvika Menon who would want to ask a question. You can unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rishikesh. Thank you so much, Dr. Kausik. Very interesting presentation and brings in a lot of thoughts, of course. But I just wanted to, I don't know much about the linear social theories, but I'd just like to, it's not so much of a question as much as if I can just comment on a couple of things that you've said. Is that all right if I comment, Dr. Rishikesh?
Yeah, go ahead. I mean, you can also show yourself.
Yeah, no, I'd not like to show myself right now. Thank you. But the point being that I think the reason we need social theories is simply because so that we don't have the kind of assessment we've had with respect to either a left understanding or a right understanding. I think why the left understanding has gained greater ground is because they have an intellectual bedrock that the right lacks. And that's why they have to pander to things like populism, because they're still getting a hold, even in our country, if you see, they're still trying to get a hold on who they can. So if I have to teach, so I teach political science. When I teach, I have lots to teach when I'm teaching left. But when I'm teaching right, I'm wondering who I can use. I mean, it's essentially Savarkar, it's Golwarkar, maybe I can drag in a little bit of Tilak if I want, that can be problematic. So I think one has to appreciate that there is especially when we talk about theory itself, theory is a lot about thinking. And I do differ a little bit. Theory is also based on some kind of empiricism, it is theorizing what is happening in society. It is not, and it might want to build a kind of utopia, but essentially theorizing is building on what you are seeing in society. To carry that forward, I missed a few parts because the lights and all went off, but I was wondering, I couldn't quite figure out, there is an instance which you're spoken about when you were talking about the majority minority, and you're talking about Nazi Germany, and you were talking about how the Nazis, of course, were a smaller number and the Jews were larger in number, and how many Jews got to escape, before, when they got to know about this. Now, I feel that we have to be extremely sensitive before drawing an example like that, because minorities can also be violent and majorities can also be suppressed. And the way one might want to look at it another way is that despite many Jews leaving, still many Jews were annihilated. And it's worse than a black spot in history. So I think as I said, I'm not very sure about what that meant, because if I were to use that particular logic, then what's happened to the Kashmiri Pandits in India is fine, because at least they got to escape, is what I would draw from that example, or what I could understand from that example. You might like to clarify that, Dr. Kausik, but that's what I felt. So I think what social theories do, and maybe we read much into it, maybe academia reads much into it. I'm not going to speak about media, because media's task is to sell news and no longer report news. They have to sell news, okay? So they're selling news and they'll do anything to market it. I wouldn't want to comment more on that. But yes, academia can get a little carried away, can get a little polarized. I agree, okay? And yes, the left liberals do have problems. Liberals take a neutral position, and in doing that, they in a way absolve responsibility, all right? In terms of maybe thoroughly explaining. But then the point then remains that if you do not want to take a liberal framework, what other framework do you want to take? Tolerance is also part of a liberal framework. So that's one more point I would want to say. And anyway, you can respond to this. And I think there's one more point which I've kind of missed because there were so many things that you were drawing. Yeah, just one last point. So also, what we end up doing when we are not looking at a certain theoretical framework is we leave out portions of history. And I know the left has also been selective. Now the right is also being selective. And your reading of some of the constitutional rights that are given to some minorities have also been selective. So, for instance, they might go as minority rights, but Article 30 essentially says that they can set up educational institutions where 50% has to be from their community and the rest can be from any other community, including the majority community as well. So, our constitution makers tried their best, to try and balance out the plurality that India was. All right, and even when even when we're looking at your own study, for instance, if I may just ask, I mean, why did you take such a comfortable setting of the Hindu and the Muslim? It is such a comfortable setting to work and to prove your hypothesis. I mean, there are so many other minorities. There are minorities within Hindus. There's a caste minority also. And I think that complicates the narrative a lot more than a Hindu Muslim, which is such an easy polarization now to fall into. So yeah, that would be all. But thank you very much for your inputs.
Firstly, of course, thank you that you have listened to me, and that actually is, I appreciate that. I will not go into talk all the issues. Firstly, it is a book. Of course, we all know, both of us know that say presentation has to be only focusing the highlighting the more main points, right? And there's a lot of nuances. I have done my study for 10, 12 years, read a lot of all this. But what I will say one thing only. If you are thinking of the left as intellectual and other things, yeah, I completely agree with you. And I actually come from the left understanding myself. So there's no dispute there. But the problem is sometimes you are on the top of the car, but sometimes you might not catch up. This is a sort of a phenomenon often observed. Last decade, I think two of the very big, I of course respect Noam Chomsky and other people from the left. But in the current discourse, there are two persons, Gad Saad and Jordan Peterson. Both are sort of not left, but they are also not very comfortably dealt with by their academic colleagues. So I think we can, of course, have a more discussion and all, and of course, you can read the book and write a critique on that in social media. I'll be happy to sort of post it also in my own media. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? Kanakala Satyanarayana, wish to ask a question? Okay, and I just also had a thought, if majoritarian myths are learned, can they also be unlearned? Like, what kind of social, academic, and policy level interventions would you suggest, having done a lot of research to, at least in terms of writing this book, would facilitate this unlearning? Is it like, particularly in societies where such myths are politically profitable?
So essentially, the social science discourse, it requires to be sort of more updated with data. So in India, I mean, unfortunately, there are so many social scientists and all. Now, of course, they are my colleagues, a lot of them. But really, I mean, only except a few. Is there really a big social phenomenon? You have solved any problem by your social sciences? The answer will tend to be, I mean, I will not go for any monosyllable answer. The answer is more negative than affirmative. So one reason is a lot of the times what we do, I mean, this is not a problem of the particular person. This is the problem of the structure. The structure is such that it encourages you to publish in Western controlled journals. Of course, Western people, they would not try that much to understand your civilizational understanding and all. And particularly, they don't believe in also, exceptionalism. They feel like India is just another country. Rather than saying this is the longest surviving civilization, they might see it's just another country, or maybe even not a country, right? Social South Asia. So from that point of view, the careers of the academicians, they are tied to parroting the Western understandings and finding similarities. So I'm not saying all academicians do not have any nuances or any such thing, but I'm saying there's a big social force among them to sort of push towards that. From that point of view, um, it is sort of a not profitable to start a discourse. Now, to break that, of course, we have to start our own academy. Actually, we can, I think my suggestion is we should have the alternative West civilizational discourse where Indians can be there, Japanese can be there, even Chinese, I don't know how much they are left with. Of course, they use their traditional medicine in a very big way, that I know. So they could also be there. So we should create a sort of a very different social sort of debate, discourse, than the Western one. Uh, and we try to see things in much more greater perspective. That is sort of one thing. I would say as an academia, we should study society much more closely. A lot of the times we say in social media and also in newspaper and in academic discourses, they do not reflect the ground reality. That is a sort of a concern. Um, and that is, I think, and other thing, as I told you, that the idea of the social science should be based on a lot of anthropocentric data, and so data and all. Now, point is, if you have a lot of data, often you do not have one narrative. But suppose you have a theory that demands one narrative. So the differences has to be ironed out. So if you are thinking that we have to arrive at a theory, you will think about differences being ironed out. And that is the problem with the theory. As Malavika ma'am was saying, that theories are required and all for understanding. I don't deny it. But the problem is a lot of the times, maybe the intention of the theory maker is not to go that unnuanced, but then over time it becomes very unnuanced. Now, it does happen in science also, but science is a course correction. Because if you have some bad theory, it doesn't work, and then it sort of tend to go back and forth. But in social science, the data and course correction is sort of missing. So I'm not sort of blaming this left is wrong and that is wrong. I'm not saying even that. I'm saying that how to sort of move progress and move forward and progress. In fact, in my book, I've written that even the liberals, they have the best of the intentions. I'm not doubting any intention. But what is the mechanism? That is what is being taught.
Thank you, sir. If there aren't any questions, we can just wrap up. Are there any questions? You can either unmute your mic and ask the question or type it in the chat below. So my assumption is there aren't any. So I wish to wrap up this dialogue or this discussion. Through this discussion, I think we have journeyed across the terrains of history, power, education, the theories, the philosophies, and the epistemology. And at its heart, I think the majoritarian myth, the book, The Majoritarian Myth, offers not just a critique, but a call, probably to replace the blind beliefs in numbers with more reflective wisdom, to embrace diversity not as tokenism, but as epistemic richness, and to defend truth even when it feels even unpopular. So I would like to thank Dr. Gangopadhyay, sir, for this very important contribution and also for this conversation and helping us rethink what it truly means to live together in difference.